Hey everyone, good morning. Happy daily drop in. We're live every single morning, Monday through Friday, here on this wacky morning show, trying to get you started for your day. I'm joined this morning with Dustin Stats, which you know is going to be good. If you can tell all the stuff going on the screen, you know it's going to be a good daily drop in. I'm so stoked to dive into a lot of different things today. It's Wednesday, so you know that we're going to have a recommendation for you coming up to extend your learning opportunities. We'll also have some good news. There's some celebrations. Dustin's got a lot for us. So we're going to get started here in just a bit. As a reminder, even if you're listening after the fact on Teach Better Talk podcast, we love to hear from you. So participate in the comments. Feel free to reach out as we go. And we'd love to get into your questions if anything comes up that you want to discuss. So we'll be right back. Loving the good morning comments already. And we'll see you in a second. Good morning, Dustin. It's so good to see you this morning, bright and early. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's early. I'm on the West Coast, so it's a lot earlier, but it's good. I love waking up early, so
well,
it's okay for me.
That's kind of our joke. We're like, oh, we're live at 7 a.m. Eastern, but I'm in Central Time Zone. You're in West. It's early, people. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Dustin, for getting up early to chat with us. That means it's 4 a.m. your time?
Yeah. I tutor at 5:30 every morning. Well, just about every morning, so I'm up pretty early anyway. So
we appreciate you extending that hour to spend with us. We really, really appreciate us. I know there's a lot of people that are just waking up right now, and it always makes you feel a little bit better for some strange reason when you hear that someone else is up earlier than you. You're like, okay, I can't be upset. It's 4 a.m. for Dustin. I get it. But right. We're thrilled that you're here. As we kind of wake up, good morning, everybody. We're thrilled you're here. If you have your cup of coffee, we want to cheers you. Good morning. We're awake for the day, ready to get started. Dustin has some water that he's starting his morning with. I love it. You guys know I'm Dustin. I don't know if you're a coffee drinker at all, but I am obsessed with my coffee maker. I just love that I get to start my morning celebrating my coffee maker.
Yeah, I love coffee. It's too early for coffee for me. I don't know if that's such a thing, but
I get you. We have a lot of people saying good morning. Great to see all of you. Happy Wednesday, September 1st. We made it through August, and there is a lot to celebrate. You know, Dustin, in case somebody here hasn't connected with you yet, doesn't really know the work that you do in education, how you're connected to the Teach Better team, would you just share a little bit of those kind of basics as we get started here for our morning?
For sure. Yeah. So I met Jeff Garias from another community that we're a part of. It's called SPI, or Smart Passive Income for the long name. It's basically a kind of a community of entrepreneurs. So he reached out to me and we got a chance to chat, which was really cool. And then what I do is I'm the owner of an online store and online community called Board Game with Education. And we focus on using tabletop games for at-home learning or for in the classroom.
I knew this was going to be good. Jeff talks about that group all the time. As if that group was his people. He brags on it. There's no meetings that can interrupt it. I mean, he swears by that crew. It's so neat that you connected with him through essentially another mastermind opportunity.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I guess what the community's grown into. It's a huge online community now, but they run masterminds through that community as well.
So tell me a little bit about the use of board games. I love board games. I surround myself with people that are also very passionate about board games. You're now talking about the fact that you help people not only utilize board games at home, but also in school systems. That's got to be the coolest job ever. I don't know. You just introduce yourself hi, I have the best job on the planet. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's awesome. It's a challenge though, too, because Not a lot of people are familiar with modern board games and what's out there. So that's part of our mission, is sharing the idea of modern board games with educators or parents, and sharing that there's more out there than just Monopoly or Shoots and Ladders or Clue. There's a lot of games. I mean, there's thousands of board games that come out a year now. So it's kind of overwhelming too. But we really like to find games that either are, like behind me, I have some that, like Cytosis, Genotype, they have educational content built within the game, or we look at some games that are more just hobby games or games for entertainment that we can kind of cater towards learning.
No, that's amazing. I my background's in middle level education, and I ran not enrichment necessarily, but a group that was really made to support struggling learners. At the end of the day, we did like an hour twice a week, and one of the grants that funded it, we decided to utilize it to actually do that support, that enrichment, that reteaching through board games. So
Oh, awesome.
it was incredible to me how many games were out there. It was so easy to find games that allowed students to practice basic math and reading skills was our focus. And I had no idea that all these games exist. So I love
Yeah.
that your mission is not only to support but also to educate in this space.
Yeah, and it's been really awesome, because I know ever since I started teaching, I've used like games or gamification in my teaching. I didn't realize I didn't realize game-based learning and gamification were terms in teaching until maybe about 4 years ago, when I really started digging into how I can apply this better in my classroom. In the past, I was just kind of using it as a solution to engage my students, but then realized, okay, I can actually teach through games.
Yeah.
Like I can target learning outcomes through a specific game.
Well, and Dustin, I know the term gamification is like so widespread. I mean, that is a term that's really up and coming. I hear it very frequently, but a lot of people don't necessarily know what it is, and they don't always know that it can be done like a cajillion different ways. It's like saying,
Yeah,
"Oh, I'm doing mastery learning." It's like great, but that has layers and layers and layers and layers and what your classroom might look like for that environment. So tell me a little bit, if gamification is a new term for me and I know nothing about that concept, can you like put it in simplest terms? Like, what is gamification if I was to like look it up and explore further?
for sure. Yeah, and I would say like a couple things with that. One, if anyone's interested in exploring it further, the best resource for it is Yukai Chow, and it's called the Octalysis framework, where he essentially breaks down every single component of gamification into like 8 different frameworks. Um, and what I realized, having read that, and that a lot of schools and teachers and classrooms are already they're using gamification maybe without already knowing it. One example is like middle school I was at 3 years ago now, they use universities. So each like eighth grade classroom was a different university here in the Los Angeles area. So like USC, UCLA, Pepperdine, and I don't remember the fourth one. I'm not from LA, so but that's gamification. It's kind of that application of the in-group, out-group. You're competing as a university through like fundraising or other like school culture events. So that's an example of gamification that maybe a lot of teachers and administrators are very familiar with, but they didn't realize maybe was also a type of gamification.
Well, and that's kind of what I meant when I said that people don't understand how large it is, because that example, every educator listening in some regard can say, "Oh, I didn't realize that I may have already been doing gamification. That's something that we do all the time, or that I did, a few years ago as students." Whereas a lot of people look at gamification as like truly gamifying every element of your classroom. Students are
Mhm.
earning points. There's some sort of digital or physical board, and that is gamification too. I mean,
Right.
we're not like negating that space as well. It's just a very widespread, and I can only imagine with your team that you have bringing gaming into schools, it might look different even with what your recommendations look like in supporting teachers with that.
Correct. Yeah, and that's for sure. I mean, that's something we've done, or I've done in my classroom when I've taught at a university in Taiwan. I gamified the entire semester. So we did a Sherlock themed semester, and they explored a mystery throughout the course of the semester. Um, but yeah, and then looking at gamification, and then something else maybe we could talk about is game-based learning, where that is targeting specific learning outcomes through play. That's not necessarily using it for classroom management or for culture, but actually through the learning process.
I love that you separated out those two terms because, to be honest, I don't know that I knew they were different. So, would you mind expanding on that a bit?
Yeah, so I guess let's see if I can think of a good example. Hmm. I usually have a good one, but I'm drawing a blank.
It's very early in
Maybe
the morning, Dustin. I mean,
yeah.
seriously, come on. It's my fault. I should have let you have at least a few more sips of that water.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess there's a couple games behind me, and those would be game-based learning. The only challenge with those is I'm thinking of cytosis specifically. You could technically play that game without having nothing about the human cell and not learning anything about it. You could technically play that way. You'll probably seep in some knowledge, um, but like adding on different activities as a part of playing the game helps with incorporating game-based learning, where the outcome is learning about the human cell through play. Where gamification, I might reward students experience points by completing an assignment about the human cell.
Oh, I totally understand the difference. That was really, really helpful because you're right that that play is in both, learning exists in both, but they are utilized in different ways. One is used as a motivation, as a reward, as a culture building experience, and one is the act of play is also the same as the act of learning. So that
Right.
is very, very cool, Dustin. I had no idea these were different terms, and I appreciate that you're bringing those little bits of information this morning because, I mean, holy cow, all of us are probably doing small elements in both categories, and can we do them better? And I'm sure the answer is yes.
Right, right. And I mean, to be honest, it gets a little confusing sometimes because sometimes I'm doing something, I'm like, wait, is this gamification or is it game-based learning? And then sometimes it can just be both. I mean, there's some overlap too.
Absolutely. And that's like everything in education. I like to think of education like the perfect classroom as a deli sandwich. You got to layer all this stuff on top of each other, these best practices, and then you get like a beautiful result, which is awesome. You
Yeah.
know, Justin, speaking of games, we're going to transition a little bit into our good news story, which is all about a little bit different of a game than we've discussed, but definitely a game nonetheless. So we'll be right back. All right, good morning. Good morning. We know it's so early. Thank you for joining us on the Daily Drop-In. Don't forget that we love to have you participating in the comments, especially if you are here live. We also appreciate any of you listening on our podcast to subscribe, like, and review. Or if you're watching us currently on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch, we'd love to have you share this feed, tag a friend, somebody who should be part of this conversation. We're talking gaming, so you know this is going to be a good morning. Dustin, we have a lot to get into to celebrate today. So first off, to at least talk about a goofy holiday. It's currently September 1st, and that means it is American Chess Day. That's a game. How fitting is that?
Perfect.
I love that, American Chess Day. Is there? I don't know what the difference is. I'm sure there is differences in chess game, but it's always good to have a American Chess Day, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the difference is between, I mean, there's Chinese chess. That's one thing that I've
That
learned
makes
when I
sense.
was in Taiwan, but I don't
Yeah.
know if there's other country chess.
I guess it's essentially we're challenging you to go play a game today because Dustin showed up on the right day because it's American Chess Day. It's also the first woman telephone operator did work today, which is very cool. So we have a lot of different things we're able to celebrate. Also, Dustin, we did not celebrate yesterday. Yesterday was National Matchmaker Day. So any of you who are currently looking for a match, you missed it. It was yesterday. We missed this out. So I don't know what to tell you. Rachel, shout out to Rachel on our Teach Better team, did not inform me that it was, World Matchmaker Day. So I apologize. Go set up a cousin or a friend. The other thing we have, Dustin, related to games is our good news story. And I don't know about you, Dustin. Do you start your morning typically with maybe some news, getting updated on what's going on in the world?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes when you're not on daily drop-in at 4 a.m.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes I play a little mobile game. I'm a lot about games, I guess.
I think that's good. I think that's good. Well, we love to start here at the Daily Drop-In, bringing some good news to our community, not only to hopefully bring some positivity to your own life, but also as a wonderful conversation starter as we're all striving to build connections, not only connections with maybe when we walk in and pick up our coffee. This is a good fun fact you can share with somebody, walking down the hallway with a colleague that you're fostering a relation with. It's also really wonderful to bring these ideas to your students and continue to find those life lessons out of these good news stories, because there are so many good things going on in the world. Dustin, I believe that I have not focused enough on the incredible Paralympics that are going on currently right now. There are so many incredible moments going on, and I have been so disconnected to the game. So truly, it was just so fitting that you were here. You were kind of my reminder, like, Rae, get back on track, go watch these incredible people, win medals and set records and just give their all in their beautiful moments. Our good news story is about a woman who lost both of her legs in the Brussels bombing, but is now competing in horseback riding in the Paralympics. So in the spring of 2016, a 17-year-old woman named Beatrice was waiting for a flash when she got hit by a terrorist bombing in the Brussels airport, along with serious burns and a spinal cord injury. She did lose both of her legs below her knee. She said she wouldn't have been the person that she is today without living through those events. And she is now currently in Tokyo representing the U.S. equestrian team as she is competing. So this article goes into all of kind of the deep background in not only her injury, but her recovery. She goes through all of the struggle of rebuilding her muscles and learning how to live in this new body. But she is currently competing within the next few days in Tokyo. And we want to share some positivity to cheer her on for an incredible run. I don't know how you feel about horses, Dustin, but I think anything related to horses is cool to watch.
Yeah, I mean, what's the one that I was introduced to this last year? Is like the horse dancing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a strange but very cool sport, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about, I mean, gosh, I am not somebody who considers themselves athletic, but I just find horses beautiful. I love animals. But have you ever ridden a horse before?
Just once, and I was like 12, maybe.
Okay. So I think I've ridden a horse as well. I think I was around the same age, and I'm not sure that I've ridden one since, but that is not easy to do, much less at an Olympic level. Like, holy cow, shout out to Beatrice that is representing the US team. That is so incredible. Dustin, if you were going to go to the Olympics, what sport would you do? Is esports a part of the Olympics, or is there like a gaming group that you easily fit into that I just don't know about?
I think, well, I would choose running.
Running.
I love to run. Yeah.
Okay, so are you a sprinter, or would you do like the marathon, triathlon? Where are you at?
Long distance. My best race distance is the half marathon. I've ran a full marathon a couple times, but the half marathon is my best performance, I suppose. I can have the best time through a half marathon.
Do you think that only people that run marathons are able to say, I've run a few marathons with that like confidence, nonchalant attitude? Like, I just want the world to know if Rae Hewitt runs a marathon, y'all gonna hear about it every day for years to come, because it will be my biggest accomplishment. And then you meet people who run marathons, you're like, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I ran a marathon yesterday and yeah, it's fine. Like I'm no big deal, like only crazy runners feel that way.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. I have a goal to run a 100-mile race. That's something I want to do. I was supposed to do a 50-mile this year, but the pandemic pushed it to next year.
So where are you going to do this 100 miles? Like, how does that work?
Um, there's a few. There's one called the Western States that essentially was a horse race that they've turned into a foot race. So we were talking about horses. It was a horse race and back a while back, but now it goes across a couple of states. I can't remember which one, but Utah, maybe somewhere in Utah, Arizona area.
Sure.
Um, The 50-mile one was around the base of Mount Whitney that I had signed up for.
Wow. So you have a lot of different hobbies. I mean, that's good, but running being one that obviously you're very passionate about. I can run around the block really well. That's about where I'm at. Like, especially if the dogs are pulling me, I do a mean block run.
There you go. What kind of dogs?
I have two mutts that I love. They kind of look like poodles. They're some sort of poodle mutt, both from
Oh, cool.
shelters. And one I got originally, very small little dog, and I was like, oh, I would love another. So I went to a shelter, and I was like, okay, I'm looking for something similar. Found one, picked up this cute little puppy, and I'm like, two beautiful matching little like dogs. This will be so great. Now he's 80 pounds, so he was not
Oh,
little.
jeez.
Yeah. So, do you have animals at home?
No, I want a dog, but I have to convince my wife to to allow that to happen.
Well, I will tell you, if you're looking to convince your wife to have a dog, you can borrow one of mine. Harvey is definitely the one to borrow. If you're looking to convince your wife not to have a dog, you can borrow Alfred. He will be helpful.
Both opposites.
Yes, exactly. I do want to give a shout out. Speaking of our family and things like that, we have Andrea in our comments this morning. Andrea has two beautiful children, Dustin, but one of them had a birthday yesterday, and so we love to
Happy
celebrate
birthday.
baby Luke, who is kind of the baby of the Teach Better team. Even though there's a lot of babies, there's a lot of babies in the Teach Better family. Baby Luke kind of has a special spot in all of our hearts. So it was just his big birthday yesterday. To shout out to baby Luke. Love it. You know, Dustin, we are going to transition here into a time in the Daily Drop-In where we truly not only encourage our audience to take questions, but really dive deeper into educational topics and everything else that we want to really think through as educators to strive to be better every single day. So, Dustin, let's get ready for this, that deep dive, that deep discussion, and we'll be right back. All right, you guys know how this works. You can head to teachbetter.com/daily drop-in or teachbetter.com/brainstorm bank to submit your questions every single morning. We like to check in with all of you and see if there's anything that you're currently struggling with, working through. I actually have a few emails from some of you looking for some ideas. So this is the time where we are also welcome to take your questions. I know, Dustin, you have shared with us that you have this passion for bringing games into educational spaces, which fits beautifully into the theme of Daily Drop-In this week, which is all focused on fostering environments, and not only environments, physical environments for learning, but that cultural piece, that element of learning, the love of learning. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into this space and the work that you've gotten to see now that you're doing this work?
For sure. Maybe I can share a story this past semester that or was it this? I guess it was like last spring. So this will be my first year where I won't be with a school doing something full time. I'm going to be part of the running club this upcoming semester, but um, up until this year, I was in the classroom or doing something, an after school program. Last year, I was asked to help at a local high school to run some enrichment programs, and I was essentially hired to create spaces for students to build relationships remotely. And one opportunity or one class that I taught was board game design in the virtual world, which was really, really cool because other publishers, like multi-million dollar board game publishers, were struggling and doing the same thing of trying to figure out ways to promote their games and share their games online in a virtual environment. So my students were at the very same level as these multi-million dollar publishers. So it was really cool to kind of show them some things that these publishers are doing and then allow them to kind of take those ideas and run with them. But because it was part of an enrichment program and it was very voluntary, I wanted to make it as comfortable for them as possible. And I wasn't really encouraging them too much to turn on the camera. Of course, I wanted them to, but so I had an entire semester with students with their cameras off. And at the very end of the class, one student, he turned on his camera and he's like, "Oh, I just wanted to show you who I am and say hi and thank you for the semester." It was really cool because having that opportunity to kind of teach throughout the semester through games and kind of have a more relaxed environment with the students really had them open up more in the classroom, which was really cool.
Well, and that's an interesting connection that you're discussing because, in one regard, you're bringing up one of the biggest pain points of educators, not only last year, but still currently this year. I was on a call yesterday with a number of educators who were kind of sharing some vulnerability about how this year really feels almost harder than last year with some of the hurdles that they are striving to overcome. One of them is having those cameras off. And so you're kind of diving into this concept of, yeah, the cameras were off, but we were actually able to do a lot of good work together, even with that choice that was being made. You know, so many educators fought that battle for so long of ensuring those cameras were on. And there's an element of, you know, really understanding that there can still be so much good that comes from that choice. And I love that you get to have that teacher moment where a student turns on their camera and it's like, oh, this is like a gift to me right now. I get to put like a face to a name, right?
Right. Yeah, it was super cool.
And so with the work that you were able to do with them, they took from being a part of this experience.
I mean, like I mentioned, I was essentially asked to come on, and usually with that grant that the school receives, from my understanding, there has to be some sort of personal development or learning involved with it as well. But because of the need for relationships and to build relationships among peers, there was less restrictions on the grant. And I was asked to teach a class through tabletop games. The title of the class was Among Us. I know a lot of teachers are probably familiar with that. Among Us, Human Behavior in Games. So I used Among Us as kind of a marketing ploy because a lot of students really liked Among Us, but then introduced some other tabletop games. But it was just awesome to see students that had never known each other before, and they were in this classroom remotely, and they got to know each other. And I jumped into some like what I already forgot, breakout rooms to kind of just listen in about when they're playing. You can see relationships form and friendships form throughout the semester, which was really cool.
You know, Dustin, I'm going to ask the really dumb question that maybe only a few of our network members are thinking, but Among Us is something that I feel like everyone's heard of. But if I'm an educator and I'm like, yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is, to be honest, Dustin. Like, I've heard of it, people talk about it, but I never explored it. Can you give me like what's the driver for this? Why did all the students talk about how much they loved Among Us?
Yeah, I'm not sure how it gained in popularity because I believe it came out a while ago, at least a few years ago.
Yeah.
Probably because of the pandemic, and you can play it remotely. But it has it's a type of game that's called social deduction, and that's came out with Mafia, and Mafia was created by a psychology teacher. So that's why Among Us has some of these different elements of psychology that I used for the classroom. And essentially, you have people that are imposters that are trying to sabotage the spaceship, and then others that are trying to get the spaceship home safely. And you don't know who the imposters are, and you have to kind of figure it out through deduction. And you do that through asking questions, seeing how students or how players respond to different questions. And that's some things we kind of discussed through the psychology of the game too.
No, very interesting. I appreciate that because I know a lot of educators were hearing about it, but weren't necessarily provided the time to really explore it. So it's good to just have that reminder. So Dustin, with the work that you do, I know that you're saying, okay, I'm not exclusively with one classroom right now. Now I get to serve all these different classrooms, which holy cow, what an incredible opportunity that you have to not be siloed and only being able to support a certain group of students and a certain group of teachers during the majority of your time, but truly have the autonomy to go out and support everyone, not only in the Teach Better family, but even those educators that we haven't yet connected with. How are you connecting with people? Or if a teacher listening right now is listening, they're like, whoa, Dustin, teach me more. Like, what is the process you go through with educators to support them?
For sure. Well, one thing we introduced this past spring too is called a board game crate, and that's kind of where I would start with any educator or anyone looking for games for learning or just games for fun. Is kind of what is your objective with using games in your classroom or at your school or in your program? Because it's not the same for every teacher. And then also another challenge is the number of students and as well as time that you're allowed to use maybe for games. I am a big advocate of using some time in your classroom to play some games because we talk about, I mean, the theme for the week is creating safe and enriching environments for our students, and games are really excellent at doing that. But just kind of going through that process of how many students are using this specifically for learning. Is it more of a game you're looking to review? Is it a game that you want to do at as an advisory period or at the beginning of every class on Friday? Kind of what are your goals for using the games or board games in your classroom?
Well, and if you don't mind me pausing you there, that is a huge element of why I'm sure when you originally connected with Jeff, he was encouraging you to come join the Teach Better community a little bit deeper, because you're really starting with the best practice that every educator should be doing, regardless of what they're exploring, is what's the objective? How does this relate to standards? How are you going to meet your end goal? We always joke all the time, like, we're always working towards something wonderful, but how will you know when you get there? And so if you know what your end goal is, what that objective is, you can work your way backwards and ensure that you create and foster the right environment to reach success. And I love that even though we're talking about games, where so many of us are like, oh yeah, Twister or Monopoly, we love games, right? Like, we're actually looking at how do you make this intentional, and that intentionality is really the difference that I see in not only your communication now, but even when I, have explored what you've been doing before our show, it really comes through as the differentiator between the work you're doing and just going to Walmart and picking up a game, is wanting to ensure that intentionality exists.
Right. Yeah. And I appreciate that. I think that's a big thing that we want to push for too, is not just using games for the game's sake. I think there is some value in that because, again, just having those opportunities with students to create those moments. There's something in games called Fiero, and that's that moment where you're kind of like celebrating with your arms above your head. You're like super excited. And if you can create those moments in your classroom with your students are not going to forget those moments.
Oh, I love those moments. So as you're looking through kind of like what an educator's objective might be, I just want to, if you don't mind, like role play this a little bit with me. So I'm a teacher. I'm listening to this daily drop-in and I'm like, holy cow, Dustin's my new best friend. I'm going to bring gaming into my classroom as soon as next week. What am I teaching next week? And as a former middle school math teacher, I'm going to say, okay, it's beginning of September. My students would typically in the 6th grade math classroom be getting into like decimals. That was like a big unit that we would do about September, right? Maybe it's a little early right now for that, but let's just pretend we're heading that way. My objective, let's say, is to have students practice adding and subtracting decimals. Now that I have my objective, where do I go from there?
Right. So decimals are tough. I don't know if I have a game for decimal. I do have one for integers.
Well, let's start there then. Integers are really common right now.
I can't grab it. It's over there. It's called Math Magician's Duel. It's from a teacher. He's actually an ELA teacher, but he designed this game for learning math and practicing adding and subtracting integers. Well, it's actually adding and subtracting, just creating equations, but you can also include or modify it to help teach with integers. So essentially, you are a magician and you are trying to create an equation or balance your equation against your opponent. So you have a hand of cards and you're either playing a card into your equation to balance it, or you're playing a card into your opponent's equation to make it unbalanced. That's essentially the game. There are some other fun like cards that you can do with your like powers and stuff, but
well, and Dustin, I'm hearing two different things, because when I am saying, oh, I'm going to go over integers, now you found me a game where I can introduce this to students and have them actually learn through the act of play, which is a huge proponent of us defining those two different terms earlier this morning. That's wonderful that I can bring that into my classroom and say, let's practice integers. And we could have a full day, a full chunk of time in our learning where students are going back and forth with their friends and practicing integers, but they're having fun with it. They're engaged with the material. That is so, so cool. And on the flip side, if I can't find a game that maybe relates perfectly to decimals, that's where I can bring in that other element of gaming where I can say, okay, the game itself won't be to necessarily learn decimals, but I can use the culture of gaming to have students compete in some way to learn the material. So, both examples are kind of touching on those two different terms that we discussed earlier.
For sure. Yeah. And I would say, I mean, there's probably a game out there for decimals. My background's on math, so our math has been slowly growing. And that's the thing, if anyone out there, part of the Teach Better community, we are always looking for teachers to help give us suggestions, recommendations, and games out there too. So
Okay, somebody right now, especially on Facebook, I don't know who's watching on Facebook right now, go tag Brianne Fennel before she has a heart attack. Somebody tell her that she's about to be employed by Dustin. This will be so good because you know that she's a huge advocate of play in our Teach Better family. And trust me, everybody, Karen Evans is jumping in. Everybody loves a good old game in the Teach Better family. So I love it. So Dustin, as I go through this, do I reach out to you to find a game? How does this work if I'm saying, yeah, I'm in, but where do I start? How do you usually recommend teachers once they have that objective? How do they find the games?
yeah, I mean, you can go to our website, boardgamewitheducation.com. Definitely, you can email me. The email games@boardgamewitheducation, that goes to me, as well as Roger, who is someone who's helped a lot this past year. He is a retired science teacher, and he's developed a lot of our science-based resources. So we kind of both manage that email address. My email, podcast@boardgamewitheducation, that's one that I more am involved with, or I use. And then we have a phone number on our website too. So
I want to get into asking about the podcast email because I believe that that's going to lead into another element of work that you are passionate about. But really quick, I just want to ask the elephant in the room question that every educator I know has asked me when I've brought games into my room, and I'm sure are thinking right now, Dustin, I would love to bring in games to my classroom. How do I do it when I have 20 kids? So what recommendation do you give to a teacher who says, yeah, I would love to bring any game that you've recommended thus far or could recommend to me in my classroom? Do I have to buy 15 copies? How do you make that work from transitioning from a family room kitchen table where you're working with 4 to 6 people versus heading into a classroom where you have more students that are a part of that? What's your typical solution for that?
right. And I did make a video about this if you search Board Game with Education on YouTube. But just some quick tips. I would say one, party style games. Party style games are meant to be played by more than 8 or more people. A lot of them go up to like 20 or 30.
Wow.
Stations can be great too, where you can actually help students prep before they sit down at the next station to play the game. And then they can have a post activity as well. And then there are some games that you can modify. So there's a game that I've used that are teams, and on teams you can have maybe 8 people on a team, but I've created 3 teams out of the game. So the third team is more of a referee, while the other 2 teams are part of the playing. So it still involves all the people and all the students in the game, as well as the part of the learning. So this game, it's called Trap Words, where essentially you're creating words that you think others might use. So if I'm trying to get my team to say, or my clue is apple, and I need my team to guess apple, the other team creates words that they think I might use, like red, Washington, or tree. And if I say any of those words, I lose. So it's a game I've used for review and vocabulary for an English language classroom. And the third team, they're the ones that are just keeping track of time and listening to those trap words. So kind of modifying the game to develop it or create it for more players. Another game that is kind of, I mean, it's pandemic, so it was a really great game. It kind of is too bad that it's like a big issue today, but in the past I've used it where I would pair up students. So it's a game for 4 players, but I paired them up with 8, and that worked really well for English language teaching because the partner pairs had to communicate with each other before they communicated with their team.
Dustin, I love those 3 suggestions because they really are things that teachers do all the time. I think sometimes when we learn a new idea, we get stuck. We only have this one mindset of how this idea can be executed. And if we can't do it that perfect way, therefore we can't move forward. And what you've just done with those 3 simple recommendations is say, hey, educators, what do you do normally when resources are limited? Well, all of us have created stations, not only because it's good for students, but because we needed to get students into small groups to do that
Right.
one lab that we wanted them to do. Or so many teachers have taken an activity and adapted it because it was going to make more sense for their learning community to adapt it. So I love that you're kind of pulling in these important lessons for educators to say, yeah, gaming might feel new to you, but it's actually a practice that you do so often that you can find yourself in this experience. I think that's so valuable. So when it comes to the podcast email, why would you need an email with a podcast in it? Do you have a podcast?
We do, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, because I would love to encourage our network to go check out different podcasts.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is it's gone through a transition phase, and it's probably going to go through another transition phase. But
Don't we all, Dustin? Don't we all?
yeah, we release it in seasons, which gives me. I'm essentially the one doing it, the opportunity to kind of develop some content and release it in batches. We started as board gaming with English. So we were a podcast for English language students and English language teachers. A student could listen to an episode about a specific game and learn the grammar, the vocabulary, and the rules for the game so that they can then go play it in English. And teachers could use that for like homework, and then they can come to class and play the game. But then we found a lot of teachers that were not English language teachers that were listening to the show. So we decided to change it to Board Game with Education, and that's what we are today. And we're actually moving into opening a tabletop game store. So that's something we'll be doing early next year, and the podcast might change with that. I'm not sure. We're still kind of deciding what to do with the podcast.
Well, and that makes sense. I mean, you want to make sure that the content that you're sharing with teachers is not only relevant but as valuable as possible. So, kind of going through those phases of making sure that the content continues that way is so natural, important, essential for the community that you're serving. I do think that there's a funny element of, your podcast in batches, because now you're really relating to, like, are you doing it like television where every week there's a new episode, or is it like Netflix where you just get to sit and binge? And to be
Right.
honest, and I know we're talking on a podcast right now that releases a new episode every day, so I so apologize to everybody who is offended by this, but I prefer it to be released in batches because I like to binge my content. Like, I don't necessarily like waiting 24 hours or waiting a week or 2 months to hear the next piece. I love Netflix style of turning on the episodes and having them play all day,
Right. Yeah, it's tough, like from a editorial standpoint, like what works best. And I guess you just kind of lean into your community and see how they respond.
Well, and that is like the best recommendation of all, because you want to make sure that you're doing what's best for not only our students, but for the audience that you're aiming to serve. So you're spot on with that. But I love that our group is going to be able to not only hopefully have subscribed, rated, and reviewed the Daily Drop-In, which obviously is Teach Better Talk podcast over on wherever you listen to podcasts. But now, Dustin, they can go and follow your podcast. They can subscribe, they can rate and review. And now they have another content piece that they can binge, right? That when there isn't other episodes, or when you're looking for some real deep dive into content, you are releasing in batches and people can just go and consume and consume and consume. I love that.
Yeah.
Dustin, every Wednesday we get into some recommendations that we have for our community to continue to foster deeper thinking into their learning. So we're going to get into a few recommendations we love, and we'll be right back. Dustin, every Wednesday we get to do this, and I feel like our Wednesday guests are just extra special because the segment is only here on Wednesdays. I know we've already recommended your podcast, which I definitely want everybody to go check out. Would you mind sharing the name again that they can go type into whether it be Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify is a really popular one. Type this in and you can go listen to it. This will be kind of our fake recommendation. We have other recommendations for all of you, but I want to make sure you go follow Dustin's content as well.
Yeah, and it's Board Gaming with Education, and potentially if you search like YouTube, BGE's Tabletop, that's the name of our tabletop game store when we open. So
love it. If you have any problems finding that, guys, please feel free to reach out to me or Dustin. Dustin will be sharing his contact information, not only obviously so you can connect with him, but later in the show to make sure that you can connect with everything he's doing, the team that he has behind him making all this magic happen. So if you have any problems, don't give up. Just reach out to us and we will get you the link and the information so you can connect with that. Other things that we like to do, Dustin, relate to recommending some sort of resource, a book, an article, a blog, anything that really helps educators dive deeper into the concepts that we're learning about. And the theme this week has been creating an environment for success, not only for the teacher, but also for the students. And while I think that the beginning of the week, we were focused on physical space, like what does your physical learning environment look like? It's kind of evolved in a beautiful way the past few days, allowing us to talk about more than just the physical seats people are in, but the environment that you choose to foster in, using 5 senses to engage students in learning. And now we've really dove into gaming, which is so appropriate to discuss as we build a culture of learning. Do you personally have podcasts, articles, websites, anything where you're continuing your learning in this topic that you want to give a shout out to?
yeah, can I give 3 quick ones?
Oh my gosh, you are more than welcome to give 3, Dustin. Always an overachiever over here.
Yeah, because they're all related to game-based learning and gamification and colleagues and friends of mine. And one is Tabletop Tolson. So she is a community college teacher in Idaho, and she also does just tabletop gaming content. So if you're interested in learning more about tabletop games, you can search Tabletop Tolson, and she does tabletop gaming content and then some content related to using games in the classroom. And then Jonathan Cassie, he's a friend of mine too here in Los Angeles area, and he's opening a school, and he has a podcast called Many Windows, and it's a really great perspective on education and the future of education too. And then the last one, Dave Eng, he runs a conference every year about game-based learning and gamification. If you're really interested in applying some techniques and learning from other professionals in the field, I would recommend checking out that conference as well.
Oh, so powerful. And you guys know for Daily Drop-In, yes, we are live right now talking through this. I know we're speaking very quickly. It's the morning. Some of you are brushing your teeth or drinking your coffee and you're like, wait, Dustin, I want to write those 3 names down. You can always listen to our episodes after the fact over at Teach Better Talk Podcast, or if you prefer to watch on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch, these are always saved there. So you can go back, you can rewatch, you can write down all the notes and big takeaways that Dustin was able to share today. And those recommendations for sure will be things to look out for. So I appreciate those 3 resources, Dustin. In addition to then the work that you're doing, I can only imagine the mass amount of work that educators could choose to dive into, the resources that are already created that they can bring now into their school buildings, their classrooms, anything in between. So I appreciate that. Can I ask a little bit of a silly question? I know we're close to our time, and I definitely want you to share your contact information. But we do have audience members in the Teach Better family who are not classroom teachers. They are not physically in the classroom, and we have focused a lot, maybe to a fault, but a lot on classroom teachers bringing this to their students, whether they're at a kindergarten level or a high school level, if they teach science or math or PE or facts, like they're, really what can they do for their students? Have you ever, or could you recommend, like, can administrators do this for their staff? Like, we always talk about staff meetings and institute days. Can't you bring all these same practices into an institute day when you need your teachers to learn new information about COVID protocols? I mean, I don't know. Let's make it super boring. Can you do that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, COVID protocols, definitely you could do it. You'd have to be conscious about how it's applied, I think. But I think the best way to do something like this with teachers is to show them an example of how it might be used in a classroom and kind of open it up to teachers as an opportunity to look at how they can apply it to their own teaching.
Oh, Justin,
Yeah.
did you just say that our leadership should model what they want to see in their classrooms? How dare you say that?
Yeah.
I love that. That's so powerful. And I was, like I said, I was actually with a few educators yesterday, and I was also sitting in on our Teach Better Team admin mastermind that happens on Tuesday mornings and Tuesday afternoons. Any of our shout outs to our administrative leaders that are out there in the Teach Better family. We always love to see you on Tuesdays. But I think this concept of understanding this year, maybe a lot of us thought it was going to be a little bit easier, and actually we're running into so many hurdles that it feels harder than last year. I think that the educators I was with yesterday weren't looking to complain. They were looking to be transparent. This year is harder than they thought it was going to be. And I love this concept, Dustin, of bringing in the work you do into supporting our teachers, not just our students, but our teachers in finding their own love of learning and modeling creative ways to make learning fun, because that's really what our teachers need right now as they are overwhelmed. Is the other elements of games. We bring in laughter, we build in community. Like, you literally work in a space where you are constantly encouraging collaboration, Dustin. That's a beautiful thing that you are bringing to the world. And I would love to see some of our leaders take on this challenge of not just being inspiring, not just being supporting to their teachers, but like bringing a little bit of laughter and fun to those challenging topics as well. So I appreciate you allowing me to kind of add that element to the end of this.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing if you're a teacher listening, you want to take one thing away is find more of your passion to bring to the classroom, because that's definitely something that fueled my fire when I was in the classroom. Was the summer, like planning for like a gamified semester was so much fun. And then to introduce that to my students was just a lot of fun.
Ugh, and your passion for this like oozes out. I love you very much, like speak like a passionate classroom teacher. Like, we get you talking about the classroom and gaming, and I love being able to talk to people who work in a field that they love and they know they're doing good work. So Dustin, I so not only appreciate you being on Daily Drop-In, but I'm just like a fan of what you stand for. And I hope that our Teach Better family reaches out to you. Would you mind sharing kind of those final bits of contact information? How can they reach out to you? Where can they find all the resources?
Yeah. So podcast at boardgamewitheducation.com or games at boardgamewitheducation.com. Either one works. And then just BGE_tabletop or Board Game with Education are the social media handles.
I love it. I am excited for everybody to go reach out to Dustin. Dustin, thank you for waking up so stinking early on the West Coast to join our conversation. I know you said that you have other things going on today to go be a productive member of society, but this was definitely a great way to start our morning together. For all of our family members here for the Teach Better family, don't forget, tomorrow we're going to continue this conversation of environment. We're going to be joined by Carly Spina, who's a member of our Teach Better family. She's an ambassador. She does a million different things with us. And she actually also has a passion for focusing on supporting English language learners. I can only imagine her passion for gaming. We'll get into kind of tying this all together. And then at the end of the week, obviously, Brad Hughes will be joining us Friday morning to conclude the week for Daily Drop-In. If you guys need anything, please feel free to reach out. Happy Wednesday. Happy September 1st. We are so thrilled you're here. Please enjoy your last sips of coffee as you head on to your wonderful day. Dustin, we're going to stay right here as we conclude, but for everyone else, cheers. We wish you a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday. Bye, guys.